Today we've got Sam Clark, one of the field technicians with Jamf, here to talk to you about Scripting 101.
Hey. Thank you. All right. So my name is Sam Clark. I am a senior field technician at Jamf. My main responsibilities include jumpstart deliveries and then helping our global integrator partners stay up to date with product training. Some of you may have welcomed me into your environment on a jumpstart. So let me say today, welcome to Minneapolis. You've been here for a couple days already, but that's my thing. So this is a presentation which is a basic introduction to scripting, and I kind of do mean basic. If you're looking for advanced programming advice for your environment, this session might not be for you. You'll still find some use. But if you have a level of understanding that's rudimentary, then I think you're going to get a lot out of today's session. So let's dive into a quick agenda. What is a script? Why do admins use scripts? Why are so many people on Jamf Nation talking about scripting? How do they work? So you may say to yourself, I've seen many scripts before, but often I just let my coworkers with more experience deal with those scripts. And lastly, where do I begin when scripting? If I want to write a script, what do I do when I want to dive in? So right off the bat, who has been this person? This is a representation of my previous workflow when I'm scripting. So if it weren't for utilizing Jamf, I might have been stuck doing things hours and hours and hours on end, researching tasks and then being repetitive with them. At first, I really didn't take scripting that seriously, so I would just use coworker and community scripts to accomplish all those tasks without really knowing how they worked. Eventually, I was kind of faced with an option, either learn how to leverage using scripts or waste a bunch of time. So the rewards of adapting my workflows to bash automation actually proved very worthwhile, and I've been doing scripting ever since because of that. So in the context of using Jamf Pro, if I have a management task, I script it. If I have a workflow that utilizes a script, I build it into my Jamf Pro workflows. So full disclosure, I am self-taught. I have resourced all of my knowledge from others willing to share within the Jamf and greater admin community. So this is an encouragement to you. Perhaps think of it that you don't need a new job. You can do this. It's not something that you need to give up on. So let's dive in. What is a shell script? A shell script is a computer program designed to be run by the Unix shell, which is a command line interpreter, or in other words, code to automate tasks. So in fact, if you've ever dabbled with scripting or if you've ever written a script, you can tell all your friends and family, yeah, I'm a computer programmer. By the way, I took this definition from the book Using the Shell chapter in the Using the Program Environment, which is written by Brian Kernighan and Rob Pike. I have not cited that up here, but come see me after if you're curious. There are various dialects of shell scripts and languages, but today we're going to be focusing on those that exist within the macOS environment. So if you've never been exposed to a computer script, use this frame of reference above. A play for a script for an actor to recite. Each line read per character actually gives you the desired outcome of a theatrical performance. In other words, think of this. Conceptualize a shell script that has an action and reaction. I have a script which dictates per line a series of actions where the computer will then interact with those commands. Okay? The end result is applied to the computer, just like following directions for assembling furniture or reading lines from a theatrical script. A shell script can be thought of as directions to and for a desired outcome on a target computer. So this might seem simplistic, but those who are new to scripting usually have trouble conceptualizing that fact and see the overall necessity for why we do use scripts in general. Meaning, why should I have to write a script if there's a GUI to do what I need to do? So why do admins use scripts? The shiny question mark. Why do admins use scripts? I'll start off, obviously, ease of use with Jamf Pro. With Jamf Pro, you're able to compose and upload and use within policies. So if you have a script written by a member of the Jamf community, or the web in general, you've got a perfect way to put that into your Jamf Pro environment and then run it within a policy. You might have heard of passing parameters or even seen this during a jump start, or maybe you've seen this within the scripts portion of Jamf Pro within your computer management settings. But just hang on to that idea, parameters and variables. I'll dive into that quite a bit during this session later. So in this fact, just keep in mind, scripts are really used as Swiss Army knife-like tools where you can pass different things such as username, password, or something fun like your favorite color into a script. So next I would say also the automation of tasks. With Jamf Pro, it's extremely simple to automate tasks performed by your scripts via execution, frequency, or other trigger mechanisms. That was talked about in Eric Johnson's session earlier today, and that was really great. So if you missed that, be sure to check that out on Jamf Nation, or on YouTube later. So for instance here, the ability to set the specific time zone is not something you're going to find in the Jamf Pro GUI, all right? So this is one example of how I can use a script to actually do a necessary administrative task. Okay, as you can see, the automated task just runs a policy with the set time zone SH called out, and then I've got input parameters for the Midwest time zone, which is America, Chicago, as it's called out in the script. Likewise, scripts are actually meant to accomplish whatever you need to do outside of a GUI, but can also be very, very flexible and very versatile. If I need something done in a specific series of actions on a computer, including timing or interaction with the file structure that might not be consistent from device to device, logging, all of these things can be done with a script. And likewise, you can actually just pass along code right into new scripts. So I'll talk a little bit about how the organization goes with that as well as we go along in the session here. So this is my favorite part of why I started scripting. I can just reuse a bunch of stuff that I figured out or that somebody else had figured out and I modified. So getting to the real heart of the matter, how do scripts work? I have a script and it works for the person who composed it, but I don't know how it functions. It's possible that the first time you encountered the need to use a script in your environment, your experience was probably something like this. So every foray into learning a new programming language usually begins with a search for examples of the code that you need to accomplish your task. A lot of people in the audience probably already know what programs best suit your needs, but keep in mind, this one's going to be for beginners to get you thinking about how to start scripting. So I would argue that even the most advanced people in the scripting community still outsource syntax for their scripts. By the time you found a script which you might do, or which might do what you need it to do, you're maybe too confused to say, I feel comfortably about using this script exactly as it's been given to me, okay? So just a heads up, you're gonna see a couple of different script editing programs. I'll go through a lot of what I'm using throughout the end of the presentation, so this color-coded example you saw in the video, I'll reference later. Okay, so this is a very basic script that I created to demonstrate what I like to consider key components of a functioning script. Okay, components of those include the interpreter, a description of the program, use of defining variables, program execution, file manipulation, and printing text. Ignore the exit code I've got there. That's pretty cosmetic, just something that I like to do when I'm testing and don't want any bad output from my scripts. All right, so let's start off with the first thing I pointed out. First, the command line interpreter. What are these mysterious characters that we see on every script that's been pre-composed for us? Scripts in Unix begin with what's called the command line interpreter. The shebang, as it's known in the industry, is indicated by a pound sign and then an exclamation point, okay? And after that, you've got the intended interpreter that you're trying to use, okay? This is the Unix command for all data to be passed to. And in the first line, you see the shell, the Unix shell. That's the original Unix shell that was created. The most recent one is the born-again shell, or bash, okay? The born-again shell is the default shell that is used, or the default interpreter that is used by Mac OS. So for the most part, if you're calling out sh with a shebang, it will, in Mac OS, refer to bash as well. I have no preference over one or the other. If I'm running on Mac OS, I like to use sh so that scripts can be passed between perhaps Linux distros and Mac OS, knowing that Mac OS will use the born-again shell. But that's really up to you and your testing and how you want to use scripts in your environment. Great. All right, let's discuss comments now. If you've seen a script on Jamf Nation, you know that there's a lot of pound symbols or the hashtag. I don't know if the kids do this. Hashtags all over your scripts. The script is full of a lot of words, and is that important? Absolutely, yes. Hashtag yes, it's very important to put comments in your scripts. It implies how the script runs. It implies even where certain components of the script can be commented out to not be run in a script, and then it really lets anyone else who takes a look now or later down the road, what was I thinking or what was this person thinking when they wrote this script. So take this scenario when you think about commenting. I've recently purchased a barbecue set, and it requires a certain level of know-how to operate properly. I'd be very upset to find out that it came with no instructions whatsoever on how it operates. So that one didn't stick as much as I thought it would, but all right. Yeah. Comments also make it possible to remove lines from your script's execution without removing them from the script altogether. This is especially handy when building and testing new scripts altogether. Okay? In this example, for instance, make dir-p/library.jss is commented out. So it's just ignore. Don't run this within my script. All right, let's talk about another hefty one, actually, that people have trouble with when they're first getting into scripting, which is defining our variables. So I'll give you the long answer. A variable is a parameter which can be referenced within a script several times using the $ symbol. So in that case, if we see the variable that I've got up here, Jamf peak, that is our variable. And then I have the syntax equals $, and with parentheses, $ parentheses, close the statement. The variable will actually then contain within your script the result of the command ls user local and then grep Jamf. Okay. So in other words, Jamf peak is now my variable. Okay. Knowing this, we can perform several powerful tasks, all while minimizing lines of code needed within our scripts. So imagine writing the top line of every single command every time you needed it referenced within a script. It would be redundant. Your keyboard doesn't deserve that. You can just call it out within a variable. So just like we see here, ls is packed into that Jamf peak. So you will, in your scripts, need to call out the variable, which equals that ls command, with a $, and then the name of your variable. So the importance is there once you start using them, and once you start getting past the hump of using variables, it's invaluable. It's really important to start using those. All right. Executing commands. I've got a bunch up here. I'm not going to go through each of these. These are just the ones that I use most often within scripting that are in the default bash shell. So if anyone has any questions about these later, feel free to ask. But these are ones that you'll probably find most useful when scripting all the way down the list. Okay? So these commands, in all the same, do include a manual. How to use them. Typing man in the appropriate command will bring up the man page, as it's called, or think of it as just a manual. It's how to use this command. It's got a description. You can see what echo is doing here. And then if you hit the Q key, that'll get out of the manual. And this is done within the terminal app, okay? So all I did was bring up a terminal, type man, and then the command. If you find commands within other scripts that you've seen, type in man that command. I'm not going to say that the command is going to make sense and that the variables, or excuse me, the command manual page is going to be really useful to you in every instance. But as you start diagnosing more and more throughout the manual page of a command, you start to get more comfortable with how they're describing that with arguments, etc. So let's talk next about file manipulation. Scripts are very useful for file manipulation, or in this example, writing output lines to a new file. So here we see the current date being written as a variable using the date command. So when I call that out within a script, the value of the date command is being written to a file in the file path private temp date.txt. Okay. The greater than symbol will create a file called date.txt at the specified path, and then pass that variable to a new file within the text file date.txt. And that's going to look like this. So we're running that previous command. We've actually got date.txt with the date of when I took this screenshot, basically. So notice the path that it was written at. This is for reference for people who are more comfortable with the Finder. There's a lot of ways to write files using scripts. This is one, it's simple, it's elegant, it should get you in the door with how to actually create files with the output of a script. So take that into consideration. There we go. All right, printing text. And what I mean by printing text is not sending text to a printer somewhere in your building. It means printing text to the terminal itself. One command which I've used a lot already in this session is the echo command. So this is the command that can be utilized to create output information to the standard output console when you actually go in and execute your scripts. This is handy when you want to know where your script is during its execution. Some commands may take a long time, but if I, through the console, don't see that output, unless otherwise using echo, I can be unsure if my script is still working, if it's still running, or how long it's taking. So here you can see in this example, I'm echoing line 1, then I'm going to sleep for 1 second. The sleep command just basically says wait 1 second. Any number is represented in seconds. And then I'm going to, this is line 2, sleep, this is line 3. Super simple, not very practical, but in an example, it looks like this. I'm running my scripts here, and it's just going to go, this is line 1, this is line 2, and line 3, and then exit, okay? So that's very basic. At this point, you're probably saying, okay, well, you executed. How did you do that? How do I actually go about executing my scripts? In the previous slide, I just had a file path with the file in mind, and I just ran it. That actually won't work unless you make the script executable. And to do that, we actually need to run the chmod command. Okay? Chmod, as it's seen up here, with the path to your script, means that it becomes an executable program. Now, with that in mind, you don't have to use the sh command in the line to actually run the script. If you've ever run a script before or attempted to just put the file path into the terminal and nothing happened, it's because you were trying to call out the entire path as a command, but it was not actually executable. So chmod actually stands for change file mode, and the +x argument will make it executable. That is extremely basic, but it will get you off the ground when you're trying to make your scripts executable. So you know what a script is. You know the components that I like to talk about. You know how to make it executable, but maybe you don't know where to begin when you want a script. It's always a big challenge for people to stare at a blank script editor and say, I need to do this thing, but I don't really know what commands to use. So I always like to tell people as encouragement, you're going to have a script of 10,000 bytes beginning with a single line. Codefucius is not a real thing. I just thought that was funny. So don't Google that. But if you do, maybe it'll start trending, and I just made a thing. So that's cool. Hashtag. I didn't make this up. I did not make this up. Yeah, that's what the kiddos do. Okay. So the thing that helped me most when I started scripting was just finding an editor that works for me. Okay. So the above examples here are Sublime Text, text editor for Mac OS. I've got Text Wrangler, which is the rope icon that you see there, but that's now bare bones edit, which is the paid version. You can still get Text Wrangler, but bare bones edit is the more robust version of that. And then Atom, which is a great free resource. It's on GitHub. That's Atom, A-T-O-M. I use all of these, actually. I don't pick one for any specific tasks. Sometimes if I need to modify a line of a script when I'm just testing, the terminal that I'm working with probably doesn't have Text Wrangler on it or Sublime Text, so I just pull up the text editor. The more comfortable you get with scripting, you'll be able to read this and understand this, but while you're starting out, it's probably better to have something that looks more like this. In any case, the highlights make things easier. You can see where the commands are, and then you can see also, it's kind of grayed out, but the comments. So it's easy to scan and see, all right, none of this matters. All of this is what's actually being executed when I run this script in the colorful highlighted syntax. Next, my word of wisdom to you is actually research your task. It gets overlooked. What am I trying to do? Sometimes you have this big idea and then you sit down and you lose sight of the idea altogether. You just start putting things together and hoping that when it runs, it does the thing that you want. But what you should really do is just make a simple plan. Organize what you're trying to do, okay? I didn't turn this into a script, but it is a plan for something that I've done in the past and that I see a lot of people doing. Modifying the appearance for the user for the Finder, hiding certain sidebar items, enabling like two-finger click on the trackpad is a big one for a lot of enterprise customers, because people don't know that there's a right click on the Mac while it's two-finger click. And logging, making sure, okay, my script has done all these things. I need to make sure that when it ran, I know what it did, because you're going to have some variance between terminals, between computers that executed this script. The next thing I would say, investigate other people's scripts. There's all kinds of great stuff inside of other people's scripts that you can take from. If somebody came up with a completely fresh, unique idea, it's probably a very old idea that's been turned over and over and over within the community to become a very specific thing. Syntax within another script can actually spark great ideas that will keep you from doing too much. So every time I'm writing a script, I start to sit down and say to myself, wow, this got really complicated really fast, and I don't know that it necessarily needs to be this complicated. So for instance, in this script, you've got the network setup, list all hardware ports there. And this is actually a very useful command for any other script that you want to run. I could consider using this in the context of another script, but not within the full variable that we just saw in someone else's script. And then, it's almost too obvious, but it bears repeating many times, so test and test and test and test and test your scripts. One way to successfully do that is to know within the terminal what your script is doing. So this example here is actually using set-x, which is make the output viewable in the terminal when it's executing. And then we've got a trap read debug. Brock Walters, great coworker of mine, gave me this trap read debug. What it does is it allows you to iterate through your script step by step when you run it. So you just hit the return key, and every time something executes, the output is displayed to you. So I'm going to show you that right now, actually, what the trap read debug looks like. Each time I hit return, my script continues. So where it pauses, that's when I'm hitting return to go to the next thing. Again, I'm using Echo because this is not an advanced scripting session or what Echo does and how you can use it. But putting this into existing scripts also might help you understand how they're executing and why they work. So that's about all I've got for you, but I do have some ideas of resources for where you can learn more if you want to really dive into scripting in a more advanced setting. Jamf Nation. Every time I started scripting, I just went to Jamf Nation. There's all kinds of scripts up there. We have a specific script section within Jamf Nation, and they're designed to be used with Jamf Pro. So check out Jamf Nation. Make sure that you are pulling from those scripts as well. There's also a lot of great syntax within extension attributes that are pre-composed within Jamf Pro likewise. I'm going to give a shout out to lynda.com. This is a great LMS or learning management system. And I actually dove right away into some of the general programming courses. So one that is on Lynda is one that I recommend called Programming Foundations, Fundamentals of Programming. Okay? So I recommend you check that out, not to learn about shell scripting or bash scripting, but just to understand what computer programming is all about, what the very basic fundamentals of a computer really imply when it comes to scripting or programming in general. So that course is done by Simon Allardyce. Hope I said his name correctly. But it's a great resource. It's a very long course, which is also very good because it's very robust. And it's probably come up in a lot of sessions before, but the O'Reilly Media, the text on bash specifically, or the shell or shell scripting, these are all really great resources. If you want to unplug for a little bit and just sit down with a book and chew on some knowledge, it's always great to go back to the actual printed manual. Although if you're an ebook person, I'm sure these are in digital format somewhere too, if you can unplug. And then lastly, your favorite search engine, just go look it up. Tons of resources are SEO optimized at this point because there's so many people looking for solutions to what they need to do. So Stack Overflow, a lot of the blogs that are run, Cryptid, some of the old ones that are still out there as well. The older posts still contain very valuable information to you. So throw it in your search engine, see what it returns. You saw me do that earlier in the script, and I still do that. Why? Because it's going to lead me down a specific path to where I want to get to eventually. Perhaps save your search results so you can reference them at a later time. But paperback's always good too. So with that, I'm going to do a Q&A about scripting. So anyone who has any questions at this point, feel free to walk up to the mic and we'll try to get your questions answered. So thank you.
Really dumb and basic question. What specific script editor were you using for the color-coded candy goodness?
That was Sublime Text.
Sublime.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll be honest. I don't get too far down the customization thing where you can make the sidebar look a certain way and make all your variables look a certain color. You'll notice I was using the green and black terminal just because it's easier for me to look at. I don't like black on white all the time, but in that case, Sublime Text with the black background, it's easier for my eyes to focus on personally.
Yeah.
So
I just figured new to scripting, it'd be something good to see the context of, well, if it's this color, it has this type of function. The
Absolutely.
commenting was good, so.
yeah, the commands that you saw that were highlighted in yellow are built into the interpreter for Sublime Text. It actually acts as a shell interpreter, so you can see like echo, chmod, all of that in yellow. So you know which commands are commands. And then even if you put quotations around certain lines, it's going to give you that in blue, so you can see, okay, this is a certain type of thing. Yeah. Oh, we got one over here. Yep.
Hi, sorry, didn't mean to take your spot. I'm starting to take Swift, and I was wondering if Swift has interactions with Bash, or how different is it? How is it compatible? If I learn Swift, will I learn some stuff from Bash, or would it help at all in scripting?
That comes down to program development altogether. Scripting is really just passing through to the actual default shell. I believe you can run certain imports with Swift, so you can call out specific shells within macOS, but from what I understand of Swift, and anyone in the room, correct me please, you probably want to stay away from Bash when you're using Swift altogether. Just keep in mind though, the foundations of what you're doing in Swift or Bash kind of apply to each other. It's a way of thinking, not the syntax that you should be so much concerned with. But yeah.
So, I'm sorry, so I guess with administration in Jamf and the JSS, would it be better to start fresh and go stay away from Swift and focus on Bash, or would Swift help?
I mean, my personal flavor of management for Macs is Bash, and Jamf handles that very well. And a lot of the scripts and resources that you'll find on Jamf Nation and in the community in general for Mac admins will be shell scripts and Bash scripts. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Beyond your text editors, what other tools do you recommend for, I guess, checking scripts over? I know I find myself sometimes I'll open it up in a generic text editor, everything looks good, I test it, it works, I upload it to my JSS, I run it, and it fails.
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah. Well, if it's any consolation, failures are good in testing, not in production. So in that regard, I bring a VM to the table. My personal workflow is to set up a Mac OS VM on my Mac, enroll that in a Jamf Pro test environment, and then go through those processes to test the script and then see where they fail. And good logging is really going to give you that. So this presentation doesn't really give you an idea of how to do the logging, but once you start diving in and getting a good understanding of what you need out of logging, then you're going to be able to, in a test environment, get all of the verbose feedback that you need from the syntax within your scripts. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool.
So I didn't have a question, but it actually answers his. If you go out to shellcheck.net, you can put your script in there, and if you've written it all by yourself, it'll tell you where you screwed everything up and how to kind of go back to figure things out. It's a huge resource and tool when you're learning, as well as kind of seeing how things have changed in Bash when you throw someone else's script in to kind of follow the logic and where you've forgotten something or you have a dangling, comma somewhere. So
Yeah.
just a tip, shellcheck.net.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Good luck.
Can script results be returned to the JSS? Or how do you get feedback?
Script results as far as what I talked about with echoing through the terminal.
Of some sort to know what the end state of that script was.
Yes, I believe anything you echo in a script in Jamf should appear in the policy logs within a policy. So that's why in this example, it translates well when you're echoing the steps. Now, if there's errors, I'm not sure if those are parsed out back to Jamf. They should be, but the output, as if you're running it in a terminal, it'd be the same, passing that back to the policy logs within Jamf.
And then those can be read by subsequent scripts?
Well, no, that would be in Jamf specifically. Is the question, how do we get the output of one script to translate to the input of another script?
Yeah.
You can use file manipulation that we talked about to output specific details from another script to a temporary file, or you can use the standard out and standard error to subsequently make other scripts do things that you might need to be reactive rather than proactive with just running another script. But my simplest explanation or solution would be just write it out to a file and then have the secondary scripts read from that file. That way, if you can write it to a computer and another script runs, the log in that case is there to pull from.
Okay.
Cool.
Hey, so this is coming from a place of ignorance as a Windows guy. Sorry.
You're very welcome. Here.
With the version of Bash that's running on OS X, are there any idiosyncrasies unique to that as opposed to other flavors of Unix or Linux? Or is it going to behave basically the same way every time, other than the Mac-specific utilities?
As far as I know, the born-again shell should translate to any other born-again shell, but that I would need to ask somebody more advanced with the Bash shell who's done translation to things like PowerShell or Windows, if that's what you're getting at, but...
Close enough.
Okay.
I mean, more like, can I take a script that was written to run on CentOS or something in Bash and have that work in a similar way on OS X, or are there idiosyncrasies unique to OS X in the syntax?
Well, I'm going to say yes and no, because the born-again shell only includes so many commands by default, and the logic operators within inside of the born-again shell are rigid. So if you're using third-party installed commands within a script, no, those won't translate.
Sure.
But if they're part of the default for that, then they should work. And in Mac OS, a lot of the commands that I showed, like echo cat, pwd, all of those should be consistent between CentOS and Red Hat Linux or Ubuntu or whatever flavor of Linux, as long as it's calling the right interpreter.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.